Good morning. For those of you that have not heard a little bit about Ascot, it's a company that had a lot of mining and infrastructure put in its past. And I'd worked with a group of people who've done very well at changing the capital equation around where someone else really put a lot of money in, and we had an opportunity to rebuild that. So last November, some people that I used to work with in Quadra FNX decided to take over the Ascot helm, and we're on a kind of a mission to restart a very high-grade gold mine for very, very little money. I'm just trying to get this to go to the next page. So Ascot's in an area in the Golden Triangle, which is kind of on the border of Alaska and British Columbia. And they've had 3 or 4 really large mines in this area before. On this property, there was a mine called the Premier Mine, and Premier was owned by the Guggenheim family, and it was mining 7 ounces a ton and ran from about the 1920s till about 1955. And subsequently, a base metals company decided to build an open pit mine here, built a lot of infrastructure, put about $200 or $300 million into the ground, was bought out by a Swedish company that then shut it down and put it on care and maintenance. And that's generally opportunities that we look for, because rather than all the capital and debt and all the requirements that are necessary to build something, that's already been done. So 3 or 4 of these mines are some of the most profitable gold mines that have ever happened in kind of the last 100 years. And we're really in the southern part of the Golden Triangle near a little town called Stewart or Hyder, Alaska. And that gives us the ability to have people and materials moved to the mine for very little infrastructure cost. Whoop, I'm still going the wrong way. In this area, there's a prospective triangle. The former group before us put 620,000 meters of drilling into this, and their strategy was to find a lot of ounces, maybe not necessarily profitable ones, but ones that were going to be a lot. So they put out a resource of 4.5 million ounces, and we're hoping a big gold company was going to take them over. That didn't actually happen. But with that, they also hit unbelievable high grades. So 1 in every 10 holes in the 620,000 meters of drilling hit over an ounce a ton. So, you know, we're not necessarily explorationists, we're engineers, we're guys that build mines. And when we see something like that, that tweaks our attention. So the areas that you can't really see too well, but there's an area in the south called the Premier Mine, another one called the Big Missouri Ridge, and in orange was an area called the Silver Coin Mine, which the company is now acquiring from a large shareholder in Hong Kong who had bought it. And that all fed the mill in the bottom and could do again. So our job when we came into the company in November was to rebuild these resources. And it's a really simple equation. It's not very complicated. The mill here can do 3,000 tons a day. 3,000 tons a day is 1 million tons a year. A 10-year mine life would be 10 million tons. And at the grades we're seeing here, which is around 7 to 10 grams, that's 200,000 ounces a year for 10 years. We don't know what the margins are going to be until we complete the engineering studies, but we're not too far away from doing that, and we would hope that we would make somewhere in the neighborhood of around $500 an ounce all in. So that's $100 million a year for 10 years for very little capital to restart. And we've done this before, and that's one of the reasons why we want to do it again. These are just some pictures very quickly of the infrastructure. You can see the mill on the far right there, the road, the port. They built a brand new power plant here in 2013, an insurance company, and this feeds the Preddy and Brucejack mine. It's a 31 megawatt power plant built in 2013, 700 meters from our mill. We have power from Stewart and from this area, so we have more infrastructure here than what we need. Just very quickly, at the first area here, we're looking at the Big Missouri Ridge. There's gold in 3 horizons here from 0 to 50 meters, from 160 to 180 meters, and also down at 300 meters. And that the area that we're buying from the gentleman from Hong Kong, Silver Coin, is on that same ridge. This will be the second resource that we'll put out in the first 12 months of existence in the company. There's a haul road that we have from this area, and there is a mine that actually exists underground, and an open pit area in the Big Missouri Ridge. The second area is near the mill in an area called the Premier Mine. What you see there is a picture of the higher grade zones that we put in place. When we first joined the company, they had enough drilling that we could put a resource together very quickly at 25 meter spacing. So we put a resource out in 4 months and then started working on our second resource. We also have 75 kilometers, or roughly 45 miles worth of underground infrastructure that's dewatered and ventilated, so we can go underground now. And you can understand that at roughly $2,000 to $3,000 a meter to build that takes time and a lot of money, which we're benefiting from. One of the things we also noticed was that they didn't do some of the things that we would typically do, and we're not explorationists, but we noticed a lot of pyrite associated with the gold, which is a kind of what some people call fool's gold. And we noticed that that had an IP, or an induced polarization signature. So we did a test line across the areas that we could go underground and found that it lit up the gold zones like a Christmas light. So you can see the zones there, the 609 and 602, in a new area to the left there that we didn't even know what it was. So we now found that there was a technique that we could find a number of additional targets that hadn't been found in the last 100 years very, very quickly. Our shareholders asked us to go and do some more of that work, and we were able to identify 12 kilometers of IP lines with a number of what we call upside targets, which we won't even put into our first engineering study. This is a picture, just a sketch of the green represents the topography, and the blue represents the underground infrastructure in the Premier Mine. That level 6 was an area that Boliden had sort of improved back in the end of 2000. And so what we're looking to do here is use the 75 kilometers of underground infrastructure to mine very cheaply and quickly. This is a picture of the mill. And so today this mill would cost, well, to give you an example, there's a similar mine that was built in 2017, which is the Bruce Jack Pretium's mine, which was approximately $700 million to build, and they did have to acquire some debt. Because somebody else did this, our engineering studies will confirm the number, but we're talking in the neighborhood of about, all in to including the mill, sort of in the neighborhood of maybe $40 to $50 million, so something like 1/16 of the cost. In the mill, the former owners had taken out the ball mill and the SAG mill, which we've been looking to fabricate, so we did the fabrication on that. And for about $4 million, we will be able to put that back in. Most of the tankage, all the foundation, the rest of the mill is in good shape. And we would change the piping and instrumentation by utilizing the fiber optic cable in the power plant that was very close to us. The only thing that we would change here is in mining, there's a method known as gravity. From the 2 other mines that have existed in this area before, the recoveries could go up to about 96% by changing the gravity circuit, and for very little money, we will put a new gravity circuit in place. In a greenfield site, or when a miner goes to build a new mine, he faces a couple other challenges. The first challenge he faces is environmental. So he needs to basically get permits, which take a lot of time to get, and you also normally in a place like this have to deal with Aboriginal people rights. Because this ground was already disturbed and we already have 3 of the existing permits, we have a mine and reclamation permit, a water discharge permit, and an exploration and development permit. Our process is very different. We have an active water discharge permit, and so we've put in place with the government and the regulators a plan to treat water for 100 years in perpetuity after we close, which they accepted very quickly. And the mining and reclamation, we go through a thing called the Mines Act Amendment process, and that process basically allows us to get back into mining in probably 4 to 6 months. So it's a much shorter process, and that's one of the benefits of having the permits already there. And on the First Nations side of things, that can be a real problem, especially in British Columbia. We're very fortunate that the First Nations has a treaty already with the government, and they get half the tax revenue that comes out of this mine. So they're fairly supportive of us doing this, which is a huge benefit because a lot of people have to spend a lot of time negotiating, and that gets quite held up. This is ultimately, they have a big say in how the government is going to react. So that's another benefit of restarting an old mine. We have 2 other assets because some people ask us, well, okay, you're a small company. How are you guys going to raise $50 million to start the company up? We have 2 other assets. One of them was a gravel mine, which the company owned in 2005. They shut it down. And recently a gravel mine the same size sold for $300 million to a U.S. concrete. We have the opportunity to sell that and raise some of the money from that sale to refinance building the mine. We also have a very large copper project in Washington State, which we're trying to restructure for the shareholders in a better format. I'm sure I'm out of time in a minute, but I'd just like to say, it's certainly a story that we've lived before and we think we can do again. Thank you very much.